Hello, guys. Welcome back to a brand new episode of the Moran Show. Today, I got two special guests on with me from NerdSesh, Carson and Logan. How you guys doing?
Doing very well, man. Pumped to be here.
Yeah, I'm fantastic, man. Thank you for having us.
How are you feeling, Logan, about TJ Watt being snubbed from DPOY?
Man, it's another snub in the long line of snubs. TJ broke the single season sack record a couple of years ago. NFL didn't want to give it to him. He did it in 15 games. And now I just think it's funny that, look, man, respect to PFF and what they are attempting to do. I just think it's funny when they are trying to come up with arbitrary and meaningless numbers that don't matter, that I can't back up, that I can't confirm that they are accurate. You know what I mean? I don't know who's coming up with these numbers. To me, it just felt like numbers that were generated to push an agenda for Myles Garrett as DPOY. All the real numbers, the relevant ones, turnovers, forced fumbles, sack, tackles for loss, QB hits, pressures. Guess who led in them all this year from the edge rusher position? It's TJ Watt. He's been snubbed I think TJ, I've said this a million times, TJ Watt is the greatest defensive player I've ever seen. I think he should have 4 DPOYs. Yes, I'm slightly biased as a Steelers fan, but I do think he got snubbed again, man, and I'm not surprised.
Carson, were you okay with the Myles Garrett DPOY, or did you think
I
TJ
was.
deserved it?
I thought that it was pretty much a toss-up this year, but I actually went with Garrett. And I will disagree with Logan on a couple fronts. First of all, I respect attacks on PFF. I'm good with that. But there are some consensus recognized numbers, like ESPN puts out their pass rush win rate and all that and double team rate. And that stuff is very accurate. Myles Garrett has an obscenely high win rate with an obscenely high double team rate. And I think to say that you're making any DPOY case based on numbers, it's always going to be flawed. Like forced fumbles, right? That's kind of a surface level thing that swung by 1 or 2 plays throughout the year. So I don't know that you can just say, oh, he has more sacks, therefore he's the better pass rusher this year. I do think there's other things at play. And also, I think the case beyond just looking at numbers at all for Myles Garrett would be more impactful run defender. I do think that he legitimately ate up more attention to make his teammates better on that front this year and was so fundamental as the driving factor to a dominant team defense that the scoring defense at the end of the day wasn't as great because the Browns offense kept setting them up, but first in yards per drive allowed, second in points allowed per drive. And Myles Garrett is so far and away number one in that equation.
Sorry, can I take this back one more time? The Steelers defense was out 8 starters, their second best defender on the planet. They didn't drop off at all. I don't know, man.
They weren't on the Browns level as a defense this year.
They were, I think, probably right on that level. And hey, last thing I'll say, the Steelers are 1-11 lifetime without TJ Watt. Need I say more?
Yeah, listen, it's a great point. I feel like I definitely don't think the pressure numbers are fake. I think that they're very real. Myles Garrett or Micah Parsons were 1 or 2 for me. I think it's hard because with TJ Watt, you see him make plays that directly correlates to the Steelers winning games. Like we saw week 2 versus the Browns, where the interception he had on Deshaun Watson was crucial, and he makes plays like that I think are bigger than what Myles Garrett and Micah do. So I think you sit with the idea that TJ Watt is more impactful, but the numbers do back up that these other guys are getting double teamed more and they're getting more pressure.
And it gets harder year in, year out. Like you said, Micah, Myles Garrett, dude, we are so... I love it, man. As a sports fan, I feel like we are just so spoiled to see. We are just getting so much more and more talented. Every position, every sport. I don't remember an edge rushing class this deep, top to bottom in the NFL. It's the most talented the league's ever been, man. And so you know what I mean? Micah, Myles, TJ, like you guys said, I mean, we're splitting hairs. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's crazy that Micah doesn't have one. He's still early in his career, but the fact that Myles didn't have one is insane. And Joel, I really like that point that you made. And I think that kind of distills down this whole conversation to me. I think play to play, Myles Garrett is probably the more impactful player. I think that when you are talking about big swing plays, settle down. TJ didn't even show up, pal. He literally wasn't there. But TJ does just have that knack for making plays, man. He really does. And you see that with the pick, you see that with the forced fumbles. I will say Theo made a video specifically addressing the idea that TJ has a clutch gene and Myles Garrett doesn't, and like compared their pressure rate in the fourth quarters, and Myles Garrett was dusting him. Okay, so like there's a million different things you could pick for either side. I think this is a very, very close debate, but TJ does have that big play factor. There's no question.
So speaking about the NFL, just so we stay on topic with the NFL, the Super Bowl is this Sunday. I'm going with the Chiefs. I'm just gonna let that be known. Even though the Chiefs are underdogs, I feel like based off everything I've been reading, ESPN analysts picking their picks and everybody else, it seems like the Chiefs are kind of the overwhelming favorite, but the books have not adjusted to that. And I'm kind of fearful of like everybody leaning on the side of the Chiefs, and the Niners have a chance to just come out here and play their best football game in weeks, because these last 2 weeks they haven't played up to their potential. I'll start with you, Carson. Who do you have in this game, and why?
So I do have the Chiefs, but I think that you make a good point, and there's a reason that the Niners are the favorite in this game. It's because they're the more overwhelmingly talented football team, top to bottom. And there were times during this year where it felt like they were a juggernaut that you would be silly to pick anyone else to beat them. Like they went on that run, obviously, after Brock's skid, where they just looked unbeatable up until that Ravens game. But to me, it really does come down to the fact that I believe so deeply in the formula of best quarterback on the planet with an elite defense that is very, very tough to beat. And I got to give Logan props. He picked the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl before the playoffs, like a madman. I thought if there's ever a year that they are going to got with all of the consistent issues that we've seen from the receivers, with just the limitations in terms of offensive explosiveness compared to years past, with a good AFC, the Ravens were such a complete football team. I thought this is the year that I'll finally pick against them. And I was wrong. And I just don't want to make that mistake again. And especially against a team that may be loaded, but still has a question mark at the quarterback position. That's not to say that I don't think Brock is good, but generally it takes a dude to win the Super Bowl. And the Achilles heel for the Niners all year has been when you get bad Brock Purdy, when you can throw him off his rhythm, then things can go really south. I cite these numbers a lot because they're just remarkable. In wins, Purdy has been effectively perfect, 28 touchdowns to 2 picks. In losses, 3 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. Like you get a bipolar quarterback. And the last couple weeks, he's played a lot of sketchy football. He's gotten out of there with wins. He's made timely plays, but he just consistently looked off in that Packers game. He was missing throws. He looked uncomfortable in the pocket. He put a few balls in harm's way this past week. And the Chiefs get pressure, man, and they are elite in coverage. And Spags is going to dial up a couple of bold blitzes, and those could be the plays that define this game, because Brock has been statistically awesome against the blitz this year. And if he can hit on a couple explosive plays in those situations, that could break the game open. At the same time, the Chiefs cover pretty damn well in those situations, so they're not as easy to beat against the blitz as your average defense. And if that turns into a Brock trying to do too much interception, that could swing the game in the opposite direction. So at the end of the day, I just think there's too much potential for those couple plays to go wrong with Brock in this game. And I think he has been escaping some of these situations, and maybe the football gods get him back in this one against a legitimately great defense. And Patrick Mahomes, I just have the utmost faith in to play awesome football. So that's really what it comes down to for me.
Yeah, I agree a lot with what you said, Carson. And I have had an unwavering faith in Patrick Mahomes. You know, it was, I've said this on our show, you know, watching Tom Brady do that for 20 years, it broke me, and I hated him for so long, and I've just let that go. And I just appreciate the greatness of Mahomes. So it starts with that. Mahomes is the greatest football player that I've ever seen. And I know that a lot of sports media personalities say that. I've watched a lot of quarterbacks in my brief time watching football. Mahomes is head and shoulders the best. And so that's obviously number one. Like, they have the quarterback advantage. But it comes back to like what Carson said. When I look at the keys to a 49ers victory, it is a laundry list. I need like 9 or 10 boxes to get checked. The Chiefs, it's like 2 or 3. And so I just think that there's an overwhelming advantage that they have. And I think you make a great point. The Chiefs defense was able to stifle Lamar Jackson. And I think Lamar Jackson is unique, that if you can dig them a hole early, if you can force him to be a pocket passer, I think he is a little more, you're able to game plan for him. Brock Purdy's not better than Lamar Jackson. And so apples to apples, I think if you can game plan for Lamar Jackson, you can game plan for Brock Purdy. And like Carson said, Spags is not only great at dialing up defensive game plans, he's great at disguising coverages. That was a staple of Baltimore's pre-snap defense, the way they rotate their safeties, the way they move guys across the field and disguise their coverages. Spags is one of the best ever at doing that. And I think that if Brock's a young guy, you know what I mean? And I think Brock's a legitimately good quarterback. Somebody pushed back on me that. Last night I called him an average QB, and a guy goes, do you really think he's average? No, I don't. I think Brock Purdy is a legitimately good NFL starting caliber quarterback. And I've come around to that. This entire season, I said Brock was mid. The bottom's going to fall out. It hasn't. Brock's a good QB, and I'll eat my words on that. But I think you can game plan for him a little more. I think you can get him a little more flustered. And at the end of the day, I think Spags and this defense are talented enough and smart enough schematically where they can negate the overwhelming ability of these weapons. But the key is, guys, I still think this is a huge factor. If the Niners can run the ball on the left side of the field, if they can get McCaffrey behind big old Trent Williams and dominate the TOP of this game, it's doable. That's the biggest key to me about the Niners getting this job done, and that is a consistent rushing attack behind Big Trent and CMC.
That's their best chance to win, in my opinion. Like, CMC has to have a big day, and they have to keep the ball out of Mahomes' hands for as long as possible. But it's crazy because you look back to this past Super Bowl that we saw with the Eagles. The Eagles had a perfect game plan. Outside of the Jalen Hurts fumble that cost them 7 points, the Eagles were moving down the field. They were controlling the clock. Mahomes didn't even pass for 200 yards, I believe. But he had a perfect game. And every single drive that Mahomes had, he was perfect. And that's what led to the Chiefs winning the football game, along with some great special team plays. Kadarius Toney having that punt return. So even if you have the perfect game script, Mahomes is just so perfect in these situations that he's going to find a way to score. And this Niners defense scares me. I think it's very vulnerable. I think it's very vulnerable against the run because of their predictable 4-down fronts. They're not going to blitz much, so they're going to count on their 4-man rush to get home. And I think for the most part, the offensive line for the Chiefs isn't the best, but because Mahomes historically takes no sacks, I think that, he basically he cancels that out. And I think they're going to be able to pass the ball. I think Kelsey should have a big day. The football gods, back when the Niners played the Ravens, they made things right by having Purdy have a disaster game, and that removed them from the MVP conversation. And then that's how Lamar won it. And I think to this moment, and I'm saying, Carson made a great point. Against the Lions in the first half, he wasn't good. Second half, he was great. Versus the Packers, he wasn't good outside the final drive. And I saw this stat from PFF that in the playoffs, Brock Purdy has 23% of his plays that are negatively graded. So 1 of 4 plays, he has a negative grade. And I think that's kind of backed up what I've seen with my eyes when I'm watching these games. And then I look at the path that the Chiefs just went on, beating the Dolphins, beating the Bills, beating the Ravens. It's like, how do you not win this game after the gauntlet you went through? And the Niners are just squeaking by teams that I think are worse than the teams that the Chiefs have played in the playoffs thus far.
Yeah, it does feel like they are much more battle tested. And I was so impressed by their wins both of the last 2 weeks. The Ravens, Logan, you talk about them game planning for Lamar. The Ravens did to some extent game plan themselves into the dirt, because I don't know why they refuse to run the football as the best rushing attack every single year. But Spags is brilliant. And I think you hit on a lot of key stuff too, Joel. We have a friend who's a Chiefs fan, shout out to Gabe, who doesn't believe that time of possession is a factor in football games. And I'm like, no, Gabe, it's just not a factor when you're facing Patrick Mahomes, because he's so explosive. He erases a deficit so quickly. And you mentioned the Eagles game last year. My Buffalo Bills, I was there, and I watched us dominate the time of possession in the first half, get whatever we wanted on the ground, and it was just these quick-hitting Chiefs drives that immediately negated that advantage. So I do think that's a good formula, and I do think that the Niners are going to be able to run the football really effectively. That's going to be their bread and butter. The Chiefs are 24th in rushing yards per attempt allowed. Buffalo did have a lot of success there in the first half, and the Niners rushing attack is just phenomenal, and it's so consistent. I do wonder if this is a slightly different dynamic with this Chiefs team. It's not enough for me to change my opinion, but This isn't the same offense we saw last year. It isn't the same offense that we've seen any year under Patrick Mahomes, and specifically finishing drives. They've been leaving some meat on the bone. They were 17th in red zone percentage this year. In the playoffs, they're just 6 of 13 in the red zone, which would rank even lower than that in terms of conversion percentage. And they haven't, outside of really the first half of the Bills game where they were pushing the ball down the field quickly, they haven't had those like massive chunk plays. They have been committing to running the ball a lot more. They've been sustaining those longer drives, and the longer those drives go, I worry a little bit about like, is one of those boneheaded receiver plays going to happen? Because they've avoided it the last couple weeks, but it still scares me. And just the fact overall that they haven't really exploded offensively. Like when you're talking about a signature Chiefs 400-yard, 30-point game, that hasn't happened since week 7 against the Chargers. So I do think that this is a different team in terms of offensive explosiveness, and it has been all year, but they still have Patrick Mahomes. And when it comes down to it, I just think he's always going to put that pressure on you. You're going to have to lead that clutch drive at the end. And if you give him the ball, he is going to lead that clutch drive. And of course, this Chiefs defense is different. Like that's the thing.
Yeah.
The Chiefs had to put up 38 points to win the Super Bowl last year. I really don't think they have to do that this year. I think they got to get to 24, 27, and I still have a lot of faith in Mahomes doing that.
Yeah, I want to speak to a few of the things you brought up, Joel. One, talking about them being battle tested. You know, in their first run, every game during that run, they trailed by 10 or more points. They had multiple games where they were trailing by 20. And so it's like the time of possession thing you just said about Gabe, Carson. With Patrick Mahomes, most football metrics kind of go out the window. The one thing that is consistent, though, that I think has been lost in the mud, and Carson and I have talked about this extensively on our show about Mahomes, we do this accreditation thing with quarterbacks, where if Brock Purdy wins the Super Bowl, and it's going to disgust me, guys, I'm going to get this out the way. Yeah. If the Niners win the Super Bowl, Brock Purdy is Joe Montana. He's Steve Young. We're putting the crown on his head. He is the King Slayer.
QB1.
He's the Dragon Slayer, right? We're going to see all these different TikTok edits of Brock Purdy, and have some yeet music behind it. It's going to be turned. And he's going to be the new best quarterback in the NFL. That's not how we should look at things, but it's a little more obvious with Purdy because he doesn't have these overwhelming traits. We also do this with Patrick Mahomes, though, and we tend to overlook the losses. And one thing that Carson is hampered on is that most of these losses have been because Mahomes has been disrupted. Right in the playoffs, it's been pressure, and it has been timely turnovers, because you can make these blanket statements for football games, right? We get caught up in all this. The Niners are going to have to legitimately disrupt Patrick Mahomes to win this football game. In the loss against Tampa Bay, right? They consistently got back and flustered Mahomes like we've never seen. They sacked him 3 times. He was under duress all game. Now, granted, that took having 3 starting offensive linemen out. Okay, but that's a key, right? The next loss that we get, the Bengals game, timely and game-swinging turnovers. They get pressure. They sack Mahomes 4 times, and they pick him off twice. Okay. So I think all of this is key to the Niners. I think you need a lot of pressure. I think you need timely turnovers. And then I think you got to get a little lucky. How did they lose that Patriots game, guys? D Ford got caught offsides. You know what I mean? Like, it's
exactly
outside of that. Mahomes has been legitimately perfect. He's 14-3 in 17 career games, 4,800 passing yards, 283 passing yards per game, 39 TDs, 7 picks, a QBR of 106.3, and a completion percentage of nearly 68. It's going to take them genuinely flustering and throwing Mahomes off, and I don't know if we can expect that, but it's necessary. Like, dude, the Eagles played a perfect game, and they lost. Jalen Hurts played a perfect game except for one play against a fumble, and it cost them against this guy. The Niners are going to have to actually disrupt Patrick Mahomes, and for me in a QB battle like this, it's just not enough, man. Like I said, dude, I don't know if I'm going to – guys, I might pick Patrick Mahomes to win the freaking Super Bowl for the next 15 years, man.
Yeah.
To your point about Brock Purdy, it is very much extreme with him, and I feel like if you're unwilling to anoint him as a great quarterback, you get backlash because it's like, oh, how can you ignore the numbers? But I think there's context to the numbers, and there is a correlation between every game that the Niners have lost this year. It's because Purdy has been bad. Like that's it's as simple as that. When they win games, Purdy's great, but then everybody else around him is also great. When things aren't perfect and he has to create, then you start seeing his flaws. And I feel like we did that last year After Jalen Hurts had a Super Bowl performance, Jalen Hurts was the second best quarterback in the league. He was better than Josh Allen and Herbert and Burrow, and he just got anointed as the guy behind Mahomes. And now we saw all the flaws that Hurts had last year. They popped up this year in an even bigger manner. And now people are like, oh, Hurts might be a system quarterback. He might be benefiting from the amount of talent. And I don't think I'm willing to go to that extreme either, but it just goes to show that I think Jalen Hurts last year, where I had him, was around that third tier of quarterback behind Mahomes and behind Allen, Burrow, and Herbert. And I have him in a similar realm this year. The winning has not really changed my opinion. And I think with Purdy, he's a good quarterback. I think he's the 15th ranked quarterback in the NFL, around there. I would have him just above, like a Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith. He's in that kind of realm. But I don't think if he wins, then we should propel him to extraordinary heights, because I feel like even if Christian McCaffrey wins Super Bowl MVP, the story is still going to be made about Brock Purdy. Like the same way how he was bad against the Packers, yet the story was made about his miraculous clutch gene and how he came back. And it's just, that's the storyline of the NFL, is so quarterback driven, which is why CJ won Rookie of the Year over Puka Nacua, who had the most historic rookie wide receiver season ever. I'm kind of fine with that, but I think, Puka definitely deserved to probably win it. When I look at the Chiefs offense, what kind of scares me is the tackle position. Jawan Taylor against Nick Bosa, Donovan Smith against Chase Young, and it's unlikely Joe Tooney's going to play. So you're going to have Nick Allegretti trying to block Armstead or Javon Hargrave. So I think in this game, there are makings for those matchups to show up in a big way and for them to disrupt the game. And that's something that scares me. That's why I feel like the Chiefs, they might play with more heavier personnel with 13 out there, just so they can run the ball and they can send Travis Kelce out on these routes as an inline tight end. But then I feel like you're playing into one of the Niners' strengths, and you are removing a weakness from their defense, which is their secondary. Ambry Thomas has been awful this year, and he's their biggest liability in the secondary. And if you're playing with condensed formations, 13 personnel, you're not playing with 11, then he's not going to be out on the field much, because they're going to be in base. They're not going to be in nickel. So for me, it's like everything the Chiefs can do offensively, there's kind of an answer that the 49ers can kind of, one up them on. But what scares me about the Niners is the predictability with Steve Wilks and his scheme. And I think if you're giving Mahomes the same look pre-snap as you're getting post-snap, I just don't know how much success you're going to have.
Yeah, I do think that the Tooney absence is scary, because Logan, you mentioned the Bucs formula. That was like the most confident going into a Super Bowl that I've been picking a team. I was like, the Chiefs team is unstoppable. Patrick Mahomes is inevitable. And then it was the most decisive Super Bowl blowout that we've seen in a while, since like Broncos Seahawks, maybe. Like, they dominated that football game. And to say that it's the most pressure we've ever seen Mahomes under would be an understatement. It felt like every single snap there were two dudes in the backfield right on his tail. So if Tooney's out, the Niners can get a lot of interior pressure. And I already really like how they match up on the outside of the line. Obviously, you mentioned it, Joel. They just have dudes in terms of edge rushers, and the tackle spots have been a concern for the Chiefs this year. In terms of how Kansas City counteracts that, I think it's going to be about a healthy balance. Like, to me, if you're going consistently with heavy personnel groupings, if you're going out there in 13 personnel, like, that's just not really Chiefs football, because you're not putting the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands. Now, I think that there is a time for that and a place for that, because this is the best rushing attack they've had in recent years. And we've seen them lean on that. And even against the Ravens, it wasn't super efficient, but they committed to it, and they were able to grind out some first downs that way. And Pacheco just runs hard and is going to be physical and is going to make that defense work to bring him down every time. But ultimately, you want this game to be in the hands of Patrick Mahomes. And I do think you want to test that secondary. And I would just way rather die putting the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands than any other way. Like, as a Bills fan, it's the same thing with Josh Allen. Like, the most frustrating part maybe of the way that the Bills ultimately lost that game was just a little bit too long sticking to that run game when it had gotten stale and predictable, and specifically bringing out a sixth offensive lineman. Everybody knows what we're about to do when you just get stuffed up the middle. It's like, put the ball in Josh Allen's hands, put the ball in Patrick Mahomes' hands.
Oh, no, let's run a fake punt and give it to Damar Hamlin.
Well, I don't want to talk about that. I don't want to talk about that at all.
That was terrible.
Jeez, dude.
That's why he didn't want comeback player of the year.
Dude, I was like, yeah.
If he converted it, he's winning. He's over Joe Flacco.
Dude, outside of maybe Chuck Pagano's like weird ass fourth down where he snapped the ball under center to one guy with one offensive lineman, that might be the dumbest play call I've ever seen. To speak, I am concerned a little bit about the offensive line. Allegretti's played really good in relief of guys. Like he shuffles between guard, center, right? He's just an interior guy that they can plug in wherever.
He's not Tooney, though. But
he isn't Tooney. Tooney's all pro. Tooney is one of the best in the league, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the one thing, though, is I think that the Chiefs can attack the Niners' biggest weaknesses, like you guys mentioned. Shout out Javon Hargrave. He's not a run stuffer, right? I think that Pacheco, I think they can be able to run still between the tackles because of how hard he runs. I think that Niners front is a little overrated run defensively wise. And then, like you said, Joel, I mean, how many times do we have to see it during the playoffs where a quarterback connects on a big shot play? If it's a seam, if it's a go route on the outside, if it's the end around to Jameson Williams to start the game, right? Like we've seen the Niners defense get hit on big plays where they're not expecting the shot, right? Where it's a surprise attack. And I think that this is the worst Mahomes offensive, Chiefs offense of the Mahomes era. But I still think that is a really big Achilles heel of this team is that I can see the Chiefs still with their lackluster talent connecting on a few big shot plays that kind of blow this game wide open. I've just seen it too many times from both sides. But do you guys think that – I don't know. I mean, do you guys really think that they can apply pressure on Mahomes? Because I think that's got to be the biggest key.
I think they can to some degree. But in these playoffs, the 49ers sack rate has went from in the regular season to being 7%. To in the playoffs, it's 2%. They're not getting home in the playoffs, and their pressure percentage in the playoffs would rank 12th in the regular season. I think they're getting pressure on 36% of snaps. So it's solid, it's good, but they're not finishing off these plays. And I think part of the reason why is the first matchup, Jordan Love has been great at avoiding sacks this year. And then the Lions have a great offensive line. But if you're facing another quarterback that is great at avoiding sacks, how often are you going to finish those plays? So I think that's a big area of concern for me.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, Logan, because I do like how the Niners front matches up against this Chiefs O-line if they're down Tooney. At the same time, do I think it is going to be to the extent of the Bucs game where it is like the deciding factor of the game? No, I don't think so. And there is nobody outside of maybe Lamar Jackson who is better at just making pressure irrelevant than Patrick Mahomes. He is one of the greatest play extenders that we have ever seen. His career sack rate is 4%. Like he just does not go down. And when it comes to that backyard football, he's the best that we've ever seen. And Travis Kelce and him have like the most special connection that we've ever seen. The dude just knows how to move to open space. Kelce does. And they have that incredible connection. So if I'm looking at like, how can this game go sideways for the Chiefs? That is a possible outcome to me. But it's not enough for me to say in the most likely outcome, like that's going to swing this game. But if the Chiefs lost this game by 2 touchdowns, I would have to think it's because that Niners defensive line ate their O-line alive.
And you guys tell me what you think of this. One of the keys that I wrote down for the Niners, I'm glad that you bring up Kelce, Carson. Kelce to me is the X factor of this game. As we've said all season long and through this episode, this is the worst, offense in the Chiefs era. Traditionally, when it's the Chiefs, it's 28, bomb. We're scoring all kinds of points. If I'm the Niners, I am sticking a bare minimum, like how the Chiefs QB spied Lamar, right? That's a big key to slowing down Lamar. Always having a guy ready to pounce. I am either going man up on Travis Kelce all game long, or I am dedicating 2 guys to Travis Kelce. Beat me with Rashee Rice, beat me with MVS, have Isaiah Pacheco kill me, but I am not getting killed by Travis Kelce, right? It's like the NBA playoffs. It's like if I got to send 2 at this superstar and have Grant Williams kill me in the corner with 7 threes, you know what? I'm going to let Grant Williams kill me. That's the way I'm going to go out. But I'm not letting the big dog kill me. If I'm the Niners, there is a concerted effort every single play to completely X out Travis Kelce. I think that's the biggest factor to me outside of pressure and turnovers, these blanket things. I am commanding attention on Travis Kelce all game long.
And because of that, Rashee Rice has to step up. 27% of his routes in the playoffs have come off of crossers. But against zone defenses, you're running directly into players that are in space.
Yeah.
So for me, I don't know if Rashee Rice is going to be very effective this game. And if they man up against them, I think someone like Charvarius Ward is going to dominate that matchup. I just don't think at this point Rashee Rice is the best at handling press man coverage. He's more so he's great against zone, but not against man. So I think it's a tough matchup, but I do trust Andy Reid to come up with these like creative ways just to get people open. And in the AFC Championship game, I mean, you saw the Ravens dedicate Kyle Hamilton to Travis Kelce, and that didn't work. It's like if Kyle Hamilton can't guard him, it's like nobody can.
That's what I'm saying, dude. Like, it just feels like in these playoff environments, he is inevitable too. Mahomes is the most, but throughout this year, it was like, of course, Kelce's still an elite tight end, but he didn't feel like the guy we've seen in years past. He felt like he had lost a little bit of a step, and he's had some kind of uncharacteristic drops throughout this year. But when it comes down to it, like these last couple weeks, dude, you can just lean on him in such a big way. I think that you have to have two guys on him basically the entire game. I would rather anybody else beat me, but at the end of the day, like, that's how the Ravens lost last week, right? Not over the totality of the game, but that final play, it's everybody's keyed in on Kelce. MVS gets wide open over the top. Those guys are going to have to make plays. I would rather force those guys to make plays and say, all right, Mahomes and Kelce, you guys are going to have an easy go at it. I also think that Kelce, like against zone specifically, has got to still be up there for the best weapon in the league. He is just so good at finding those soft spots. He so consistently gets open.
That being said, though, I mean, I think you make a great point, Joel, about Kyle Hamilton, because I mean, he's oh my God.
Superhero.
Dude, Kyle Hamilton is, with Minkah Fitzpatrick being out this year, that guy's, his straight line speed, his size, his tackling ability, his ball instincts. I was saying it after week 2 because friend of the show, Theo Ash, I know pre-draft was like, this is the greatest, this is the greatest prospect, I've ever seen. And then you see him grow. The Niners have the personnel, though, right? I mean, Fred Warner, Dre Greenlaw, if you're going to put, these guys have size, they're great in coverage, and if you're going to do it, I would dedicate one defensive back, and then, and even if the defensive back's in a hook zone or a deep middle third, and you're just having him spy Kelce, wherever he goes, I'm going to shade him, and then you have the guy one up. I think that's a big key for me. Like, I don't think that's too much, right? That means that you have 9 other guys. So say you have 2 dedicated to Kelce. That sucks. I mean, you're asking, like you guys said, if you dedicate 2 to anybody, those other 3 guys are going to have to pull the hell out of their weight. I think the Niners have the best defensive personnel that we're going to see Mahomes have to face, though. We talked about they've fought through the Pantheon, and the Ravens are great, too. I don't want to completely discredit what the Ravens have defensively with their scheme and their talent, because they really do have an all-pro defense. And wholeheartedly, I mean, the Ravens kind of stifled Mahomes more than we've ever sseen any other team do it. I know that the game plan was different, right? They hand the ball off to Pacheco a lot more. It's not Mahomes having to go over the top and do it. And the game script would have been different if the Chiefs were trailing. But the Niners also have really great defensive personnel, man. Can get pressure with 4, have those linebackers that can cover. But that's the bottom line for me. If I'm San Francisco, I'm not letting Travis Kelce kill me. I will not let that happen. If it's Rashee Rice, I will die by Rashee Rice. You know what I mean? If it's MVS, I will die by him. But I'm not letting Travis Kelce kill me on the biggest game.
All year long, there was question marks about the Chiefs because of their offense mainly. And I think because of that, we overshadowed just how elite this defense has been.
Oh, yeah.
And, I mean, the guys they have on it, I feel like because Mahomes is as great as he is, and I believe he's the greatest quarterback I've ever seen as well, the defense is not getting talked about. But the biggest reason why, if they win a Super Bowl this year, if they win it, it will be because of that defense. That defense is the MVP of this entire run because of how well they've played. L'Jarius Sneed, to me, has been the best corner in football. Not being an all-pro this year was a disgrace. I'm a Jets fan. I'm a huge Sauce Gardner guy. L'Jarius Sneed this year was better because he was traveling. Trent McDuffie is awesome. Chris Jones, Karlaftis is coming into his own. Drew Tranquil in this specific role they have him play is awesome. I love Nick Bolton, Justin Reed. They just have guys everywhere. And the matchup for me is really just how they're going to send pressure to get after Purdy. because in a Lions game, you saw the Lions send pressure from the nickel spot with Melifanu, and he would get home at times, but then he would miss some tackles that would turn into a big play.
Yeah.
Brock Purdy has been excellent against the blitz, but that's only when the blitz has resulted in no pressure. When he's been blitzed and pressure has gotten home, it doesn't look very good. And with Spags, he sends the most pressure and he sends the most unblocked pressure. So guys are getting home quick. Trent McDuffie, I think, is third in the NFL in blitzing from that nickel position. And if you're getting home on Purdy, if McDuffie's coming unblocked and you're forcing Purdy to move out the pocket in a foot race with McDuffie getting to him, it's going to result in a lot of negative plays. So that's the biggest key for the Niners offense to me, is just how they're going to handle pressure. And this defense is so remarkably great that I wish that they were more of a talking point in all of this, because Spags deserves to be recognized as one of the better DCs that the game has seen. And this personnel, I mean, top to bottom, it's really remarkable. It's awesome. It's an elite unit.
Absolutely elite. And you are right. There's no question it's the MVP of this run. Like, if we look at the totality of these 3 games, I would say that the Bills game, like Mahomes, was unbelievable. He won them that game. The Dolphins game, the Chiefs offense looked pretty good, looked better than it had in most of the regular season against kind of a practice squad defense, but they held the Dolphins to 7 points. And I know that none of us here are very high on Tua Tagovailoa, and I think that, he got exposed for his limitations as a creator in that game, but that's still pretty damn impressive, dude, to hold that Dolphins offense to 7 points. And last week, of course, like, the Chiefs offense went stagnant completely in the second half. I mean, they didn't put up any points. Like, they were just consistently quickly giving that ball back to the Ravens, and the defense just kept getting stops, dude. Like, it is as elite of a unit as we have seen all year. Nobody explodes against the Kansas City Chiefs. Nobody. Like, the worst game they've played this year was maybe that one against the Packers where they let up 27. Just nobody pops off against them. So I think that they do have the personnel, and I think that they do have the mind, man. And I really think those couple of big time blitzes are going to decide this game. If they're able to get home, if Purdy's able to deal with that pressure. Again, I do think that the Chiefs corners are going to be physical at the line. They're going to press. So you buy yourself a little bit more time for the pressure to get home there. I think that that's going to be huge to determining this. And Spags has made a lot of dudes shrink over the years, and he's made a lot of dudes uncomfortable. And it's going to be telling if Brock Purdy is made for that moment or not.
I think you guys made some great points. One, about the defense thing. Joel, you're exactly right. I think the discourse after the Ravens game was so funny. Like, look, we can say that Mahomes is the greatest QB we've ever seen. We've had the sample size is large enough, right? Yeah. Why are we doing that after a game in which his team put up 17 points, man? What are we doing? Two, on the point about the blitzes, that's been a huge key, I think, in any playoff matchup. That's kind of opened my eyes to just how defensive coordinators can break open games. Aaron Glenn, that was key to the Lions winning their first 2 playoff games. Just blitzes where, pre-snap at the line of scrimmage, you're diagnosing, you're reading where the safeties are, where everybody's lining up. You're literally just not accounting for that guy. That's why it's so key that just the key points you pick up that defensive back blitz. The flip side of this, we're going to give a ton of credit for Spags and what he's done, right? His track record is immaculate. You're immortalized after you take down the undefeated Patriots in the Super Bowl, right? Ton of pressure, great D-line, and they slay that dragon. And Spags has done this on numerous occasions. On the flip side of this, I think the guy that's been getting underrated, we can look at all the overwhelming skill, talent, and talent that the Niners have top to bottom. The mastermind is Kyle Shanahan, right? And that to me is a huge key too, is it's like we can point to Spags and what he's going to dial up. What the hell is the evil genius Kyle Shanahan going to dial up in this game, right? That's kind of getting lost in the shuffle. We are looking at a chess match of epic proportions between these two, where it's going to be, it's, can you get him? Who's going to get got? I think that's going to be a really interesting, because Spags deserves immense credit for what he's done and how all the great QBs that he's stifled, but Shanahan's going to have a couple aces up his sleeve. You know what I mean? This is the biggest game of the year, and Shanahan has been here, and Shanahan has had to eat a lot of, I was going to say the S word. He's had to eat a lot of crap over the years. The Falcons game, right? Crumbling in that spot. The Chiefs game where he basically comes up with a perfect game plan and Jimmy G just misses Emmanuel Sanders, right? They could have won that game. Shanahan has a lot to play for in this game because he is slowly kind of building himself it's ironic. It's almost an Andy Reid like reputation, right?
Yeah,
Where you can get to the biggest stage, but you just can't get it done, right? His father, ironically, had that reputation too. There's other, great coaches in NFL history. Dan Reeves, great regular season coach, but he gets to the big game and then his team gets shellacked 55-10, right? This is the ultimate. Bill Cowher. Bill Cowher is a quintessential guy that you can point to in NFL history. Always would get to the NFC title game, could get to the AFC title game, could get to the Super Bowl, but he crumbles. That's sadly the reputation that a lot of these coaches build because you're so great at getting these teams to the spot, but you just can't get it done. Shanahan has the most he's ever had to play for in this game, and I got to think that he's going to dial up an all-time game plan, but it's not enough for me to pick it up. But that's one of the biggest keys, I think, is we can point to all the skill talent, all the great players.
Yeah.
This is a chess match of epic proportions between three of the greatest football minds, Reid, Shanahan, and Spags.
I think that's an excellent point. With Shanahan, I think now he is the most free he's been as a play caller since being in San Fran, because Jimmy Garoppolo limited him to a lot of what other things he can call. But with Purdy, even though I think he has his limitations, the playbook is now open. You can call anything you want with Purdy. My thing with him is because Purdy's undersized, I feel like in the playoffs he hasn't handled condensed pockets well. And I think when the Chiefs send pressure at him, or even when they just rush forward, I think the game plan is kind of going to be like Lamar-esque, where you're trying to keep him within the rush. Don't let him have any escape routes out of it, so he can't beat you with his legs and play make out of structure. And I just feel like when he's in those condensed situations and he has to throw over defensive linemen, the Chris Jones matchup against the interior of that 49ers offensive line is one that I think can really make the game. I want to see how Brock Purdy looks in that spot. When the pocket is collapsing, when you have Chris Jones putting his arms in front of you, trying to bat the ball down, will you be able to throw accurate passes to the windows, to Ayuk, to Debo, to Kittle, etc.? That's one of the biggest keys to me. I don't have much faith in like Brock Purdy having a spectacular game. I think if the Niners win this one, it's going to be because CMC has a $150 and 2 touchdowns.
Yeah. I think that, Logan, you talk about Shanahan having to dial up a great game plan. To me, just committing to the run and limiting how much stuff Purdy has to do out of structure, how many like real standout plays he has to make, because I really just don't think that this Chiefs run defense has been all that good this year. So put the ball in the hands of your best offensive player and your greatest overall strength, which is the run game. And Shanahan's reputation is really interesting to me because one moment or one game can just do so much to define a person's reputation if it's on a big enough stage. And for him, it feels to me like that moment more than any of the Niners stuff is just keeping the ball in the air in the Falcons-Pats game. And ever since then, it's like, I get it that he's lost in NFC title games and Super Bowls, but that is so much more about the caliber of quarterback play. Who is winning a Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo? Like, it would take a miracle, and they got really close. And at the end of the day, Jimmy didn't make the plays that he needed, right? He overthrows Emmanuel Sanders is the one that everyone points to, but he just is not the level of quarterback who can conventionally win you a Super Bowl. And Kyle Shanahan has made these Niners offenses elite no matter what with his scheme. And of course, they have great skill position talent, and those guys are going to have to make plays. But I think that in some ways, like, Purdy has an opportunity to save Shanahan's legacy because he is better than a Jimmy G. And no matter how you cut it, dude, winning a Super Bowl with second-year Brock Purdy at quarterback is impressive and is a testament to Shanahan's coaching brilliance if he can get that done. I agree with you, Joel. I think that Purdy, when those pockets get tight, we saw it. I think that was a big factor in terms of why he was missing so many throws in that Packers game. Like, yeah, the weather wasn't good, but it felt like in those crowded pockets, he just wasn't able to get the throws off as cleanly as he likes to, or he'll bail on those pockets early. So that's what's interesting to me about this game. Like, no, I don't want to anoint Brock Purdy necessarily just because they win the Super Bowl. but I think he'll have to make a few big time plays. Like, I think the Niners are going to rely on the run game. I think that's what they should do, but you just don't often win a Super Bowl, and you don't win it against the Patrick Mahomes kind of guy unless your quarterback steps up and makes those few big plays.
I completely agree. And that's what I was going to say is, like, Joel, you talk about Purdy playing a spectacular game. I think McCaffrey can do all that. I think he can have an amazing game on the ground, and yet you still need Brock Purdy to play not a spectacular game, a flawless game. Like, you need him to play perfect football. That's what it's taken to beat Patrick Mahomes thus far. Your defense playing a great game against him, and then on the other end, the quarterback playing nearly flawless football. And it reminds me, the thing you bring up with the pocket, it reminds me the pre-draft stuff that everybody used to say about Russell Wilson. 2011 was like the first year that I really got into the draft and prospects with like Cam Newton, Blaine Gabbert, Jake Locker, immaculate QB class. You know, crazy.
I was on Jake Locker. I thought it was going to be somewhat good.
Christian Ponder too, man. I remember listening to that draft on the radio, but the next year we get that awesome QB class of RG3, Luck, Foles, Russell Wilson. And it reminds me because, Kurt too. Everybody said in the pre-draft, I remember I was in like 5th grade, man. I remember drawing pictures of like mini Russell Wilson behind a huge offensive line. Like this guy's gonna suck. And it can get overblown, I think, with certain guys, but it's a real concern with Purdy. He's a smaller guy. He can't make those throws over the top of the pocket. And that's what it's going to come down to. I think that the one elite trait that Brock has, and the one thing that Shanahan and him are going to have to weaponize, is that mobility, that play extension, that get out of the pocket. Like, no, Purdy's not a conventional pocket passer, but that's what makes him special, right? Purdy without mobility is like slightly better.
Mac Jones, I fear.
He's slightly better Tua. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to rag on the kid, but it's like that's the differentiator. Brock Purdy is a good quarterback because he can do that play extension stuff. He's not a pocket guy. So I don't know if that's dialing up. If you are anticipating Purdy going above and beyond in the pocket and dissecting the game like a Brady, like, they're going to lose. They're going to lose. That's not Purdy's game.
If the 49ers win, it'd be hilarious because you have all these all-time great quarterbacks, Lamar, Josh Allen, not being able to beat Mahomes. And it's like, okay, the one guy that you win with is Brock Purdy. What do you guys think the final score of this game is going to be?
I'm going to go 26-20. I don't think it's a super high scoring game, and I think it's going to be consistently competitive. It's really tough for me to see the Chiefs like blowing the Niners out of the water. I think that would require a Purdy disaster class, and that's just not what I'm expecting. I think that Purdy is like mentally cut out for the moment. I think that he's a guy who has stepped up. I don't think that he's going to fear it to the point where he's going to like crumble. And the Chiefs just like don't really have the formula to blow a game open to me against a team as talented as the Niners. They haven't really blown that many games open against anybody. But when it comes down to those big clutch situations, I do trust them more. And I trust that defense to disrupt Purdy enough to make some timely plays, make some timely stops, that I think that the Chiefs win by more than a field goal. I think it's a 1-score game. I think it's like a medium scoring game in terms of, the totals between the two teams.
Carson got mad at me for predicting a semi blowout against Baltimore. I'll be that guy. I'm going to say it's 31-21. Chiefs win relatively convincingly.
That's one of the first 30 scores I've seen for the Chiefs in this matchup. I'm glad you're taking it though. 10-point game. I'm gonna go 27-21. I think the Chiefs win. I think the score will feel much more convincing. But I'm going 27-21. That's what I think the score is going to be.
Very similar. I'm right in that same range.
It just ultimately comes down to like the overwhelming, like the Carson. I remember freshman year, you told me when you're dealing with something, you come up with a pros and cons list, and essentially when you're going down to keys for a game, like I said, man,
I don't do that. Maybe I did that then. I don't do that now.
Yeah. Really useful though, if you're struggling with something, it's very handy.
It is.
When I come up with the keys to the game, like I said, the list for the Niners is about 9 things long, and the list for the Chiefs is about 3 things long, and that's what it comes down to. I have that level of faith, and at the end of the day, I mean, the most composed guy on the field, Patrick Mahomes, has given us relatively no margin. Like, he's been very, very consistent on big stages against great defenses. Again, we have the outlier games, all the ones that he's lost. The Bengals game, the Pats game, not even the Pats game. He played a pretty good game.
Great game.
The Bucks game, exactly. I do think there's a lot at stake, though, for Mahomes with a victory. You know, he'd be a 3-time Super Bowl champion. He'd be, I think, one of six QBs to win at least 3 Super Bowls. Brady, Bradshaw, Montana, Aikman. 5. Hypothetically, wins he's a 3rd-time Super Bowl MVP if he gets it. He's a 2-time regular season MVP. Like, I know that we've already anointed Mahomes, but I mean, he really does have I'm probably not going to make the take. There'll be somebody, if the Chiefs win this game, that'll come out and say, you know, Mahomes legacy-wise is already the greatest QB ever. I think it's still going to take Mahomes doing this for another decade, to catch Brady. But there's going to be a very strong argument on the table if he gets this done, if he gets Super Bowl MVP, and of course the fact that, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, the Chiefs will be the first team to win back-to-back Super Bowls since the Pats, right?
Yeah.
And yes. I mean, that's a huge accomplishment too, man. In the NFL, where you're losing coordinators every year, where free agency is more prevalent than it's ever been before, where you can really swing your entire franchise in 1 to 2 off seasons through the draft. Take a look at the Texans. Take a look at the Lions. Like, it's really remarkable that they would have gotten it done. A lot's on, obviously stating the obvious because it's the Super Bowl. Huge legacies are on the line, and I think nobody has more to gain in this matchup than Shanahan and Patrick Mahomes.
I completely agree. I want to get your guys' thoughts quickly on the NBA trade deadline. Who you thought were some winners and some losers of it. I'll start with you, Logan.
Biggest winner? We did a trade deadline show the other day. I was a little underwhelmed. I don't know about you guys. We talked about this, that we didn't see as much star migration, but again, as Carson put it on our show too, we saw a lot of guys get moved pre-deadline that we didn't normally see. Yeah. I think the biggest winner was probably the Dallas Mavericks for me, just because I think they addressed their biggest need in going out and getting Daniel Gafford and PJ Washington. I love watching Dallas play. Dallas is one of my favorite teams to watch just because they have Luka and Kyrie. And when they're on, it's awesome. Oh my God, it is so much fun to watch. The shot making, the fluidity, the ball movement. When you have 2 guys that can score the basketball like that, it's really fun. But they'll get into these lulls where they're missing shots. They can't get any stops. And the worst thing is you can't get rebounds. If you talk to any old head who's ever played or watched basketball, you win games by crashing the glass, by getting the boards. They couldn't. They're just small. They're unathletic. They got Grant Williams out there at the 4. I mean, like, come on, guys. What do you expect to happen? Now that they have PJ and Gafford, you just have more athletic guys, competent players who can step in, play physical basketball. They've got more size. And, yeah, they addressed their biggest issues in the front court. And I think that matters, where previous to the deadline, I probably would have said that the Mavericks are an easy first-round exit candidate, where now – I don't know. I can kind of see them potentially making a little noise. I don't know if I'd pick it right now, but I can see them winning a series and pushing a team in the second round.
I like what the Mavs did a lot. Post-Kyrie trade, that entire front court was decimated. The big situation, it was back to Dwight Powell. The wings were very, very subpar, and they've done a really good job of rebuilding that front court with limited resources. Like, I'm not going to say that it's a standout group, but they continue to upgrade. I think that having Gafford and Lively out there together, like, now you've got 48 minutes of quality big play. You've got athletic play finishers who Luka is going to be able to feed out of pick and roll. You've got guys who can protect the rim at a high level, who can rebound the ball very effectively. Like, just doing the simple big man stuff, but doing a really good job of it. And I think that it's nice to have a guy like Gafford, who's a bit more veteran than Lively. Not to say that he's been in like these high stakes playoff environments before, but he is also just physically more mature. He's stronger. He's more of a bruiser. Logan, you mentioned how old heads will talk to you about rebounds. My grandpa always talked about 2 things winning basketball games: rebounds and making your free throws. And Derek Lively can't make his free throws. At least Gafford can. You can trust him in those closing situations. And PJ Washington, it's going to be interesting to see just how he adjusts to playing on a real basketball team instead of the Charlotte Hornets, because there's no question that he has more upside than a Grant Williams, more skilled offensively, more athletic, has the defensive traits. He's long, he's bouncy, he's got a little bit more size in terms of height, and he's still like a strong guy. He's 6'7", 235. So if he dials in, if he does the little stuff, if he simplifies his role offensively, I think that could be a big win for them too. My winner of the deadline, though, probably Joel. We were talking about this before we started recording.
Yep.
I love what the Knicks did, and I just continue to fall in love with them as a basketball team. Bojan Bogdanovic is such a consistently productive scorer, and to have the luxury of bringing a guy like that, who on a lot of teams would be your third best player, obviously for the Pistons, he's been their second, but they are the Pistons. But like, that's just a luxury. He's one of 19 guys this year who's scoring 20 points per game on 60% true shooting. That combination of volume and efficiency, every other dude in that club has been an NBA All-Star, and they're like clear All-Star caliber guys. So I think having a dude who can get himself out of a bucket out of pick and roll, he's been an 80th percentile scorer there, but who is also this lights out shooter, is so valuable for the Knicks. And Burks, I'm not as high on. I think there's going to be spots where he's doing his Alec Burks thing and he's maybe taking a few too many tough shots and you don't want to play him, but that's okay. You don't need to. You have great wing depth. And when he is playing well, you have another guy who can handle and who can knock down those spot up jumpers. So after the IQ trade, my one concern here was, are they going to have enough shot creation off the bench? And I think that now they do. I really like what they've done with that second unit, and they're just increasing their talent overall. They're increasing their spot up shooting on the wings, which last year was devastating in those playoff environments. Teams did not have to respect their shooters, so they were able to load up on the stars, and that killed them. It made life harder on the stars. Brunson still held up because he's just a dog, but Randall really struggled. And I mean, they were the worst 3-point shooting team in that playoff field. So they just continue to address their issues and improve. And if Julius Randle doesn't do his thing in the playoffs, like if he does his regular season thing, if you get good Julius Randle, then this team should be in the Eastern Conference Finals. That still concerns me. I don't like how he scales to a playoff setting because of his reliance on tough mid-range shot making, his reliance on his jump shot overall that's very erratic. His playmaking has tended to really regress in those settings. He can be a black hole. Like, he is the one reason that I am not all in on the Knicks, but I'm still pretty far in because he can't be worse than he has been in years past. And the totality of this basketball team is just awesome.
Listen, that's fair. You know, I wouldn't trust Julius Randle either. I think the good thing is that even if he stinks it up, I think now we actually do have enough good players to make up for the stench. And that's what I think was different than in years past. I think the Knicks were the clear winners of the deadline. Like, I think they're in the tier of their own for not just the moves they made yesterday, but getting OG Anunoby, Precious, who Precious has been rebounding at such a high level with the Knicks. He's playing awesome basketball. I think we have 10 guys in rotation that can give us valuable playoff minutes. The Mavericks I'm really intrigued by. And I don't like this overwhelming hate for Luka that's kind of been brewing up. Grant Williams gets traded and people are like, oh, you know, Luka doesn't make guys better. Grant Williams got more open 3-point attempts. He got more open 3-point attempts with the Mavericks this year than he got with Boston last year. And that speaks directly to Luka and his playmaking and how much attention he draws. I was watching a podcast with Luka on JJ Redick's pod, and they were talking about the 73-point game. And he was speaking specifically on the deceleration that Luka has when driving to the basket. And he asked him, is it something that you practice? And Luka just said, no, like, I don't practice that at all. And it's just how natural the game comes to Luka. Because we make everything so much about winning, I think we're not truly appreciating like how great he is at this young of an age. Players that are 25 or younger points per game, Luka's averaging like 35. Second best is Maxey at like 25 a game. And that's just the gap between Luka and where he's at his age versus everybody in the league. He's already giving us prime James Harden numbers, and he's not even in his prime yet. I think because the Mavericks improved the frontcourt depth, I can see a scenario where they can maybe make the conference finals if everything goes right and we get a nuclear Luka and Kyrie in the playoffs. Yeah. So I think this boosted their chances tremendously. And I love what OKC did with Gordon Hayward. I think Gordon Hayward was a perfect player. He's somebody that's kind of gotten underrated in Charlotte because nobody pays attention to them, but he's good. I like it a lot.
Yeah. Well, if I could just speak a little bit more on the Luka thing, because you're preaching to the choir, dude. Like, people judge Luka and have been judging him for years as if he is a 28-year-old guy who has the pieces around him to where he should be winning a title, which, like, he's played himself into that sort of expectations because he had maybe the greatest offensive season we've ever seen from a second-year player. He led the Mavs to have the best offensive rating ever at that time.
Crazy.
And it was literally just spot-up shooters and rim finishers around him. Like Brunson hadn't emerged. He didn't have anybody else who could really threaten a defense with the ball in their hands. That's what he does. He strangles the pace every possession. He gets what he wants. He gets into the lane. The deceleration, I've never seen anything like it. His change in pace is unbelievable. Him and SGA, they do it in different ways. SGA gets to more of that high gear, shifting gears. Luka, it's more about the deceleration, slowing down. But both of them are just unbelievable manipulators of their body movement and speed. The playmaking is generational. And in playoff settings, dude, like nobody has been better offensively than Luka. Well, okay, maybe Jokic, but Luka just goes nuclear, dude. He averages 33, 9, and 8 on good efficiency in the playoffs. So if you're going to bet on anybody to just carry a team, especially if they have another shot creator like Kyrie, like I don't think that the Mavs defensive ceiling is high enough. But if they were able to defend reasonably well, we saw it a couple years ago. Luka got them to the conference finals, and Brunson was really good in that run, and the team defended better overall. But it's not like they were an overwhelmingly great defensive team. He's that special. He's on the trajectory to be one of the great offensive players this game has ever seen. Like, could be on a tier 1 trajectory. I think he's off to the best start that we've seen probably ever through 6 years now. So he's capable of special stuff. And I did really like what the Thunder did as well. To me, it's just like such a clear upgrade. You take a guy who is a big ball handler, who is going to be able to facilitate out of pick and roll. You had that in Josh Giddey, but Josh Giddey can't stress a defense in the same way because he's so inept as a scorer. Off ball, he's a problem because he can't knock down catch and shoot jumpers. And in a playoff setting, that's going to get exposed. Teams are going to leave him and you're going to be playing 4-on-5 offensively. And that's a problem. But with the ball in his hands as well, like Hayward is just the better touch shot maker. He's over 50% on floaters. He's the better pull-up shooter. He just does so much more overall that is serious in a playoff setting. Whereas I think that Giddey, if you need him to play 30 minutes a game, there's going to be some matchups where he's just getting played off the floor because he can't knock down a shot. And I do not worry about that with Gordon Hayward.
And Hayward brings that, we talked about this too. He brings a little bit of a veteran presence to the team. Hopefully he's a stabilizer. I think Luka gets that hate because I think the defense thing, I think the fact that he is this good at such a young age, and then, I don't know, Luka's a little whiny, right? Like Luka's a little bit whiny.
No, he is.
Sure. But
he is.
I do think he can tend to get underrated. Like, I mean, when you're talking about like the MVP conversation, it's like, he's got to be up there. I mean, what are the Mavs doing without him? I do want to ask you guys, do you think that it's, and these stars are so polarizing, it's like, playing alongside Trae Young or something like that. Do you guys think there's merit to that? Like with the KP thing, with the Brunson thing, is there any merit to it's hard to play alongside a guy that is as heliocentric as Luka, or you know what I mean? Is it hard to coexist?
That's a fair question. And I think there is merit to it. Just like there's merit to star players trying to fit next to LeBron. Chris Bosh with the Miami Heat Big Three, his numbers took a huge dip. Kevin Love having to become a spot-up shooter, and he had to reinvent his game because he went to go play with LeBron. So I think whenever you're playing with an all-time great player, even though Luka dominates the ball, possessions are more efficient when he dominates it rather than giving it to someone like Brunson. As great as Brunson is, more Luka possessions, you're likely going to get a better offensive output. I think Jalen Brunson was a weird case because he wasn't always this player. He broke out in his own way, and the Mavericks refused to give him a 4-year, $55 million extension at the time. That was on them. So the Mavs front office kind of pushed Brunson out of the way. What if he had been this on Dallas? I don't think so, but I think he would have been an all-star caliber player. He would have probably bumped up his average to 21 to 23 points per game. I feel very strongly with that. With Porzingis, I feel like it was just injuries. I think there was definitely merit to KP and Luka didn't play the best together. I feel like sometimes Luka would settle for tough shots when KP was open on a pick and pop. There were a lot of moments of that. But Porzingis, after he got injured with his knee, he just fell off on defense. And Rick Carlisle kind of wanted to remove post-ups from his game. So I think it was kind of a combination of the coaching and the injuries, it led to KP not being his best self in Dallas, because in his first playoff series with them in the bubble, he was averaging 23-9 on great efficiency. Then he gets hurt in game 3, and now you don't have that second star next to Luka. So I think there is some merit, but whenever you're playing with an all-time great player who demands the ball like that, they're like, players have to fit to them. It's not the other way around.
I do think that it's a really interesting question, Logan. To me, Luka is like already one of the all-time great floor raisers. That's exactly what he did in his second year. That's what he's been doing for a half decade. You give him average players, and because he can dictate every possession and get to his spots on the floor, create penetration, and then he's either such a big physical driver and he's such a great touch shot maker and he's this unbelievable passer, like he's going to get you a good shot every time. So if you put just average guys around him, he is going to make them so much better than a vast majority of your star players around the league would. There is also a trend throughout NBA history, though, that overwhelmingly ball-dominant styles don't win. And I think that when you're talking about a Jalen Brunson, Luka could have allowed him to thrive more by allowing him to dictate more possessions out of pick and roll. And Luka also could have enhanced his value playing away from the ball, right? He could have been more willing to come off of pin downs and to weaponize the gravity that he would still have away from the ball, making life better on Brunson. Like, those are the little things that if you want to maximize your ceiling as a basketball player, you have to do. You mentioned the adjustment to playing with LeBron, Joel. I think that LeBron is obviously one of the 2 greatest basketball players ever. But when we're talking about like the GOAT debate, one of the things that does matter to me is portability. Like Michael Jordan, I think, fits alongside more different great basketball players because of what he can do away from the ball, his malleability offensively. So when you are holding him to like that all-time standard, it's like, yeah, Luka's going to have to figure out how to play away from the ball a little bit better so he can allow guys who are really good with the ball in their hands to thrive a bit more. And also, I think that allows him to be a higher effort player defensively if he isn't burdened with creating every single play. So all of those things are fair, but that only matters once you're like, okay, is it Luka Doncic or is it Steph Curry the last few years? And that's why I would have taken Steph, because I do think that he can do more to allow guys to thrive with the ball in their hands. The stress on the defense is so constant when he's away from the ball. But that's it. Like, if you're trying to hold Luka to the standard of almost anybody else, it's like he's clearly been a top 5 player this entire time. He's one of the great offensive engines, and he's got time to figure that stuff out. He's 24 years old. This isn't the best version of Luka. He's still got more to unlock. He's consistently gotten better. Coming into the league, right, he didn't post up at a high volume. Then he became one of the most dominant post scorers in the league. Like, I think he's improved as a shooter over the years. I don't want to put a ceiling on what he can be. And he just gets held to that standard because he's so damn good.
If you look at the Western Conference Finals run, their best players, Dorian Finney-Smith, Reggie Bullock, Dwight Powell starting at center. I didn't mention Jalen Brunson yet because that's an obvious one. But outside of Brunson, the best players, Finney-Smith, Bullock, Dwight Powell, Spencer Dinwiddie. Those are the best ones. Reggie Bullock is not even playing minutes in the NBA right now. Dwight Powell is now the 3rd center on the Mavericks rotation, and he probably isn't getting minutes anywhere else. Spencer Dinwiddie has been terrible in Brooklyn thus far, and Dorian Finney-Smith, he's all right. He's good. He's still a good player, but it just goes to show, like, that's who Luka took to the WCF.
Yeah, it's like the 07 Cavs, man.
Yeah, it wasn't a good team at all. It's honestly crazy. Who do you think lost this deadline? If there's a team.
To me, it's honestly just like the teams that sat it out, because I don't look at any of these and think, oh man, they got fleeced. But I do look, first of all, the Chicago Bulls. I don't know what they're doing, bro. Like, first of all, not dealing anybody, then coming out and saying they want to commit to DeRozan long term. Like, I feel so bad for Bulls fans. That is such a terrible place to be in as an organization, to be so content with mediocrity, to have such a clear understanding of, okay, this is our ceiling. These are our results, and we're aging, and we're just going to ride the wave. Like, that's ineptitude from the front office. And I do also look at the Lakers, and maybe there wasn't a great deal for them on the table by the deadline, because the names that we heard thrown out there throughout the regular season, it was Zach LaVine, who then was off the table and done for the year anyways. It was Alex Caruso, who then the Bulls took off the table. And by the end, it was kind of like DeJounte Murray. I know that some people wanted them to get Jeremy Grant, but Jeremy Grant's on this long-term contract. He doesn't get moved. So their options, it seems, were trimmed down significantly. I just thought that was a team that from the beginning of the year had to improve through a trade, because the D'Lo, Austin Reeves backcourt, I just think there's too much redundancy there. I think that they're too similar offensively in terms of what they do as secondary shot creators. And then I think they're two of your four best players. So you want to have them both out there, but then defensively in the backcourt, they're both going to have their issues. They're both going to be liabilities at the end of the day. So if they could have traded D'Lo for a player who better fit a need, who could bring that point of attack defense, then I really would have liked that for them. And they didn't get that done at the end of the day. And they have 39-year-old LeBron James. So I can't necessarily give some scathing review of, oh, they blew this trade, because maybe there wasn't that much on the table by the end of the day. But over the course of this year, one of the big questions was, is LeBron still going to be at that superstar level that they need if they want to make a deep run? And LeBron individually, when he wants to, has been. So to not make the most out of that window is just painful to me, I think, because I still think the Lakers are good. I think they're much better than their record. I think they're scary in the playoffs because they have LeBron and AD, and that team defense is going to be really good. But I don't see that upside for them. I mean, certainly beating like a Denver. I think beating the Clippers would be really tough, and that's disappointing.
Yeah, I agree with those picks. The Bulls, I don't know if you guys saw that stat. They have not made an in-season trade in 3 years, and hold up, Carson, did they actually come out and say that they are committing to DeMar DeRozan?
That's the reporting. That's the reporting. They want more DeMar, Levine, and Vooch.
Oh, that's
I just don't know how you can keep chasing your tail, man. Like, wow. Not surprised by Chicago. I was shocked that LA didn't do something, especially with the proven track record that, 1, people want to play with LeBron. 2, it's Los Angeles. 3, the fact that we've seen this twice. I mean, the 2018 Cavs at the deadline, completely, changed their team. Last year's Lakers completely changed their team. Like, it's been a proven thing that they can get this done. And I thought they had assets. Like, I can't assume that D'Angelo Russell's value is ever going to get any higher. But that's the one thing, Carson, is you talk about, like the Lakers scare me moderately in the playoffs for LeBron and AD, but I've just been woefully disappointed with the role players and how they played off. And the complexion of it is going to look a little different, because I think LeBron's going to be a little more ball dominant. I think Anthony Davis is going to dictate more possessions when we get down to the playoffs, right? Like, your stars are just going to take over more. But I've been really disappointed with the spot-up players. I picked the Lakers to win the finals preseason. Again, a lot of that was contingent on them making a move, like Carson said. And their a big part of that was because they had 5 of the best spot-up guys in the league statistically from last season. Reeves, D'Angelo Russell, Christian Wood, Taurean Prince, and Roy Hachimura were all deadly when you could create them an advantage and either attack a closeout or get into their shots. And, Reeves and D'Lo have pulled their weight. They're as solid as they come. But Prince sucks. Hachimura has not looked anything like he looked in the playoffs last year. And Christian Wood has been really disappointing. Maybe they can win a playoff series. I would never count LeBron and AD out. Maybe their defense looks great, but considering the consistent lack of effort that I've seen, and considering my lack of faith in these role players, the ceiling's not there, and like Carson said, that's the biggest problem, is that you are wasting a year of LeBron James, the second greatest player in basketball history. I mean, that just has to be so frustrating.
Exactly.
And what's all the hourglass emoji tweets and everything he's been saying for now? Like, how funny is that? Like, he was teeing up for a classic LeBron midseason blow up. Ham gets fired, or they make a bunch of moves at the deadline, and nothing happened.
Exactly. Like, I think that's why the Lakers to me were losers too. I think the Bulls also losers, because with LeBron, the time is now. He's 39 years old. So you can't really think about, in the offseason, we'll go and try to make a pitch for Donovan Mitchell to come play with him, because LeBron needs that roster now. I think D'Lo was a perfect trade piece. Even if you were thinking about doing like a Brooklyn reunion and sending him to Brooklyn, I think if the Lakers got Royce O'Neal back and Dorian Finney-Smith and maybe Dinwiddie from that deal, they become a much better team. They might get Dinwiddie off the buyout market. That's how badly the Nets just wanted to move on from him. And the Raptors didn't even want to keep him. But I just feel like Reeves can play point guard to me. And LeBron is also quite clearly a point guard who can initiate. So if you add in defenders, which I think right now the Lakers lack perimeter defense. So Finney-Smith, Royce O'Neal, I think it makes them a better team. And I think I can trust them more in the playoffs because they have guys who can guard.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know what the Nets thought they were going to get for Dorian Finney-Smith. Like they turned down the 2 first-rounders, and that would have been an awesome trade. Like just clearly, right? More quality wings. That's what they need. They need wings who can defend at a high level and knock down shots. And they're just not good enough there.
The other loser I had was the Kings. I thought the Kings probably should have made a move too. They've had some really bad losses recently to the Hornets, to the Pistons as of late. I just feel like right now they just need more injection of talent on their team. And I would say the Nets. I think the Nets are just standing pat, kind of like the Bulls. The difference is that the Nets don't own their picks. So I can at least understand why they're trying to compete because there's no reason for them to tank blatantly. But another team, if the Rockets are offering me my picks back from Mikal Bridges, I'm taking it. I'm not making Mikal an untouchable player.
I agree. There's just like such a clear ceiling, and Mikal and Cam Johnson, like they're fun and they're good. They're also both 26, 27. Like it's not like these are dudes who are going to go on a dramatically upward trajectory. They're not guys who are ever going to be like the dude for your franchise. So get assets, especially get your assets back, dude, because they have just been gutted. The Nets have been gutted for the last 12 years, dude. They can't keep their picks, and they're never very good, and that's not a good spot to be in. The Kings are interesting to me just because I feel like they kind of are what they are for now. Like, I just don't know how high a defensive ceiling they can reach with Sabonis holding it down at the 5. And also, like, they don't have a lot of plus dudes up and down this roster. Outside of Keegan, it's like, okay, the backcourt's not great. HB as your other wing isn't great. So to me, they're just like so clearly locked into fun team. They have 2 stars. They have dudes who can knock down shots. They're going to be a productive offense. They're well coached, but like, I don't see the path to them getting real stops against these great teams in a playoff setting. And I also worry there's a lot of big physical athletic teams in the West, and the Kings, I just don't love how they match up in that environment either.
That was always my issue with them pulling the trigger on the Domas trade. It wasn't that, Domas isn't this all-star player or he's not skilled or anything. It's that, you're never going to have a great defense as Domas is your guy. And also, I love Halliburton. Oh, my God, man. I don't know how you could just see it on the tape, dude. There's just guys that are so unselfish, that just move the ball, that just work. I mean, that's what gutted me, dude. I didn't know that Halliburton was ever going to be a scorer or a shooter of this caliber. I was always kind of skeptical about his catapult-like jump shot, but the passing was off the tape, man. It was crazy. And they really are. They're just stuck in, I mean, I guess it's better than being, DeMarcus Cousins leading out your squad and winning 30 games, but it's still not, there's no ceiling to this. And the limiter is Domantas Sabonis. I am a Kings fan. Shout out Keegan Murray. I think he should be all defense this year. That kid is clamps. I think he can take on teams' best wings, but you guys are both right. They need an athletic 4 or an athletic 3. Like Harrison Barnes just needs to be gone and be done with, and somebody else needs to come in. And then until Domas has a reliable, like, I've never seen, he's got such great footwork. The guy has very little touch. Like for a guy that gets 20 points per game, most on the low block and with mid-range jumpers and stuff like that, he can't actually space the floor out to 3. And he actually can't score when you give him physicality on the low block. He just doesn't have great touch. And so in any playoff scenario last season, Looney was just dropping every time from, if you're going to take a 19-plus foot jumper, I'm going to let you take it. And they did, and it cost the Kings. It does really seem like there is a hard ceiling. They're a fun team. They're going to win 40-plus games this year. They're probably going to do that for the next 5 years, but are they going to ever win a playoff series? I don't know. I probably wouldn't pick it considering how tough the West is going to be for years to come.
One day we're going to talk about just how much it sucks to finally have expectations, because the Kings last year were just this fun team. Nobody's really thinking about them much. And now this year it's like, it's just kind of gloomy because there is a limited ceiling on it. I appreciate you guys for your time coming on the show. It means a lot to me. I love this conversation. You guys got a lot of ball knowledge, and I love the trivia that I did with you guys. By the way, I didn't know that I had that Portland Blazers in my mind, but I was like, oh my God, it brought out a whole new side of me, and I really enjoyed it.
Dude, Prisbilla is an all-time trivia time nerd sesh poll, dude.
So clutch. If you guys haven't seen it, Joel just like rattled off. It was the 09 Blazers, right? Prisbilla and Steve Blake clutch pulls. That was really fun. But this was really fun too, man. Appreciate you having us on, and always great to talk with you.
Yeah, just for the audience out there listening, where is it that they can find you guys?
So on TikTok, we're at NerdSesh. Instagram is the same. Twitter at nerd_sesh. As Joel just mentioned, we do a lot of trivia stuff there. NBA and NFL. We're branching out a little bit, but mostly NBA and NFL is our bread and butter there. And we also have a show with the volume. So if you want our full podcast, we do that 3 times a week. We talk NBA and NFL and do some trivia there. And on our YouTube channel, all of those full shows you can find with video. We also will do like video breakdowns, 10, 12-minute deep dives into film on certain guys, mostly NBA. And we have a new like trivia show, a long form show that we're starting there as well. So that's just the NerdSesh YouTube page if you want to check us out there.
All right. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.